I'd like to give another example, Emma, because I
Yeah.
think sometimes those practical examples can maybe help people who
Mm.
are struggling with this. I had a client of mine who was going to a lot of networking meetings, and off the back of the networking meeting, having coffee, and it was not going anywhere. And what I suggested this client do is, or what I asked was, well, how much are you finding out about the other person? Like really finding out about them. And what we helped them do was change the way they were having conversation. So thing is, if you go to a networking meeting, if you go to a meetup group or anything like that, there are lots and lots of people there, and people love talking about themselves.
Mm.
So, rather than going in and going, hey, I'm a coach, this is my business card, maybe I can help you, um, or listening to the other person but not really listening, just waiting for them to finish or finding something that you can pounce on. For me, what I helped my clients see better was, okay, find out who they are, find out what's going on in their life, find out what their biggest challenge is, find out what problems they're facing right now, find out what they'd love to achieve. Just do a lot of intake.
Mm.
Because when someone says no to a conversation, what they're really saying is, I don't think it's valuable to speak to you. That's what they're saying.
Mm.
And so you haven't demonstrated that it's valuable to them to talk to you. Now, in a very basic level, how this looks like is, if you can find out what someone's challenge is or issue is or problem is, or what their dream goal is, or whatever people talk about, if you find out something that's really relevant and important to them, and then you say, hey, would you like to have a conversation about that, because I might be able to help, it's like a no-brainer for them. It's like, oh yeah, well, either this is a really big problem I want to get solved, I need some help, or this is a great goal or something that I'm trying to achieve, I would love some help with that. If you're really hitting one of those 2 points, to me, in my experience and what I've seen with other people, it's highly unlikely they're not going to have a conversation with you. When
Yeah.
they don't have a conversation with you, it's because you've not linked those things together, that having a conversation is going to be helpful to them to achieve one of those 2 things. And it's normally because we don't know what their problem is, we don't know what their challenge is, or we don't know what goal that really fires them up.
Totally. Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And I like the point in that it is simply that they haven't made that link between something that's of real value to them and what you might be able to do for them. It's not a rejection of you, it's that you haven't helped them create that link in their mind. And I like that you mention kind of meetup groups and networking events and stuff like that, because again, I can remember personally sort of years ago not being able to see where you had these conversations, and then as I found that I got just less and less sort of didn't realise it at the time, but less and less self-obsessed and more interested in what was going on for other people rather than how I was doing, it just became the same sort of thing as you described, where it's just incredibly natural to find out about people, and then it either makes total sense or it doesn't, to offer to carry on exploring that with them. And if that's something that's new to you, it may feel uncomfortable and you may feel like there's some deep breath and line you've got to step over to make that offer to people. But it's just one of those things, again, don't wait till you feel like you can do it, just start doing it, and after a while you'll feel okay about doing it, and you'll actually enjoy doing it.
Yeah, and I think that's a great point about feeling uncomfortable, but I think that's often, and I felt uncomfortable doing this too. I wasn't just got into coaching like, oh yeah, this is easy, even though I enjoy having conversations. Saying I was a coach or saying that I might be able to help, it did feel uncomfortable for me at the time, but the more that you do it, the more normal it becomes.
And actually, part of the reason that lots of people feel uncomfortable saying they might be able to help at first is when you start, you don't have that many reference experiences that demonstrate to yourself that you can help. you don't. But the way you get those references experiences is by offering to help people even before you feel ready.
Yeah.
And before you know it, you'll have lots of experiences of where you've made a real big difference in somebody's life.
Yeah.
It will get easier and easier to say that you can, you know, that you may be able to help a person.
Mm. Yeah, I mean, just last week I was sitting on an aeroplane, and this has happened to me before, but I sat down and the person sitting next to me, you know, just got curious about them. So they didn't start talking. I was just like, oh, I was heading back from San Antonio, and I'm like, oh, you know, the person had an English accent, which I heard, and I was like, oh, you've been over here on holiday? It was just a very innocent, simple question, and we started talking, and then, you know, I found out what he did, and then asked if you know what he asked me what I did, and I said I'm a coach, and he said, oh, what do you do? And I told him, and he said, oh, I think I could do with some help, you know. And it's as simple as that.
Yeah, it can look more complicated.
But I know a few years ago I could have been in that exact same conversation or that same situation, and number one, I wouldn't have spoken to them. Two, if I did, I would have been really reluctant to say I was a coach, you know, or if they did say, oh, maybe I could do some help, I probably would have pounced on them. Okay, well, let me fix you now while you're on this plane. You can't go anywhere. You're stuck with me for the next few hours.
Yeah.
And instead, what I said is like, well, why would you need help? You look like you've got it all together. And I'm really kind of chilled out about it because that, you know, I don't need to make, you know, I don't need to jump on someone, if you like. I don't need to say hold still while I coach you. You know, it again, it's coming back to intake. It's about finding out about the other person, seeing what's going on in their world, and then if I've got something relevant to say, sharing that.
Yeah. And actually, you can, not that it matters that much, but you can enjoy, you know, just treating those kind of conversations with complete strangers as just pure experiment. I mean, there's never anything riding on it, but there's really nothing riding on it with a person that you're never going to see again if they don't, you know, if they don't take you up on your offer or whatever.
Yeah.
You know, it can be just a game, really.
Absolutely.
This is tracking right back to something that we talked about earlier, about the website. I just wanted to kind of mention my experience because I never got a website together. When I first started coaching, I spent so long just messing around trying to decide what my messaging and so on should be. It kind of never happened. And I remember particularly a few times in the early days, when somebody was about to sign up, them asking for my web address and or expressing concern that I didn't have a website. At the time, I remember it kind of sending me into a panic because I felt like, you know, I was some kind of imposter or something because I hadn't got one. And then I just realised more and more that often when people are about to make a decision that is big for them in terms of money or commitment of time or change, which can be a really scary thing for people, even when the change that they're anticipating is all good, they can kind of throw up objections, and they kind of just want you to be reassuring and be kind of like steady for them. And I know that when I first started, I could have saved myself a lot of grief if I'd realised that, because now I see it as something that certain people just do ahead of making a big decision. And if it wasn't the website, it might have been something else. And as it happens, as I've got more and more settled into what I do, that's just doesn't come up anymore. Like, but people will raise these things, won't they? I haven't got the time, or it's expensive, or whatever. And it doesn't mean they don't want to, and it doesn't mean. And in fact, I know Jamie Smart always says that he takes objections as buying signals, because if people really didn't want to, they wouldn't need to give reasons, but just say no. They're actually looking for you to help them answer their questions, or, you know, get a bit of peace of mind about the decision they're about to make, or whatever it is.
Yeah, I mean, and that comes with time. You know, if people are listening to this who are really new or just starting out, then, you know, I would just say get started. Just take the next step, because these things come with time. They don't come straight away. I didn't have them straight away. You know, I do have a website, but, you know, I'll give you an example. I run immersion events for men, and I don't have a sales page. And so sometimes I'll speak to someone and they'll say, oh, okay, yeah, great. Can you send me the website? Can you send me the link where there are more details? Can you send me to the sales page? And I say, I don't have a sales page. I am the sales page. And what I say to people is, because I had a sales page for my very first event, and it doesn't capture what my event is about. It doesn't capture the experience of working with me. And that's the same really for coaching, and I'm sure for anyone that's listening to this. You know, no website, no sales page, no matter how good it is, can really capture the experience of coaching with you. And so, you know, it's helpful to explain that to people. If you don't have a website, or even if you do, really be aware that it's the experience which is powerful, and the experience which sells coaching or events. And so when I say that quite often, you know, pricks people's ears at, like, oh, okay, this is a bit unusual, this is a bit different. And I really focus on giving people an experience of what it is to like, what it's like to work with me. That helps them, because that doesn't mean they will work with me. It'll just help them make a decision to whether they want more of that. And like you said earlier, it's not a rejection of me or a rejection of anyone. It just helps you work out if you're a good fit for each other.
Yeah. Should we do you feel like we've covered, you know, the kind of in fact the next question might answer the first one as well. So, you know, the first question was about how to start up and going from unknown to landing paying clients, and we've basically said have lots of coaching conversations. Another question lots of people are interested in, and I think in lots of cases this was coming from people who have already got, you know, like a part-time or maybe even full-time coaching practice going on, but are interested in new ideas on creating clients. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, and again, I don't know what people are doing, so I'm just going to throw out a few things that just come to mind. And I think if you ask me this next week, I'll come up with some other ideas. So this is such a wonderful, creative profession, and I love being really creative with it. I love always coming up with new ways and ideas and experimenting. And I think that's really important. You know, I'll give some examples, but also it's really great to know that you can just do whatever you want and you can have fun with it and you can experiment. That's the beauty. And one of the great benefits of this profession is that it isn't rigid. It isn't like, do this, do this, do this. You can do it any way that you want. For me, I can talk about how I've got clients. Some of that has been through giving talks. So I know I did a talk in Las Vegas, for example. I got a bunch of clients from that. I've spoken in Romania a couple of times. I've spoken in Birmingham, my hometown, a couple of times. And again, it's just an opportunity for people to experience me, hear a little bit about what I do. And some people will want more. And for those people who want more, you know, it's the same thing. I end up in a conversation, and sometimes that conversation ends up in a proposal, which leads to a client. Sure. So that's kind of, you know, one way that I've got clients.
Can we? I'd love to hear more, but just in case that's in case people kind of want a bit more detail, or they kind of want to know how to go about doing that, just for starters. Would you mind just talking through kind of how that happened? Because I'm guessing that you have some kind of areas that are kind of quite close to your heart, or you feel passionately about sharing, and that's the kind of first port of call. Is that right?
Yeah. No, that's a good point, Emma. I think one thing, and we've kind of touched on this a little bit already, but one thing is visibility. You know, when no one knew I was a coach and no one knew what I was doing, I didn't get invited to speak anywhere, right? And if I put myself forward to say, well, would you like me as a speaker? They've got nothing really to go on. Mm-hmm. So I think really the first thing is, what's really shifted for me is that I got visible. So, you know, to whatever extent that I got visible. So when I spoke in Las Vegas, that was an event I had attended previously as a client. So the organizer knew me. Mm-hmm. He knew that I was a coach, that I'd gone in that direction. I started sharing about my experiences, and I started talking about it. I had previously asked if I could speak at the event. I'd gone back just as, not as a speaker, not as an attendee, but just as a returning person. And I'd spoken for a little bit simply by asking. And it was then last year that I was then asked to go back, because they knew I was a coach. They knew that I was doing something in this field, and they had some kind of experience of me. Mm. And so you're right. It's about being visible, and it's about the community that know you. If I tried to go and get a speaking engagement in a field that no one knew anything about me, and there was nothing to go on, it's probably going to be a lot more difficult. But I'm finding now as well, the more visible that I am and the longer that I'm coaching, I'm now getting people requesting me to come and speak at their events. So it takes time, but you know, it can be both ways. One is, if there's an event you see that you'd love to speak at, really, there's nothing wrong with just contacting the organizer and saying, I would love to speak at your event. And you would be surprised, you know, not every time, but if you do that enough, you would be surprised how easy it is to get speaking engagements. And outside of big events, you know, there are meetup groups. There are all sorts of organizations who look for speakers. There are all sorts of voluntary organizations. There are all sorts of charities. There are all sorts of groups locally and nationally, all over the place, that won't pay you to speak. But if you're not looking to get paid to speak, there are lots and lots of places that would love to have you there to speak at their event. So just look around, find out where you want to go, ask the question, make yourself more visible. If you do get a speaking gig, try and record it. See if you can record it and share it. If you can't record it, get a picture of yourself speaking, share that, put it on your website if you do have one, stick it on Facebook, whatever. Tell people about it, because once you start doing that and you put it out there, more and more people will become aware of that, and they might say, "Oh, I need a speaker. Why don't you come and speak at my event?"
Sorry, go ahead.
No, it's incredible just how much happens when we just put ourselves out there into the world.
Oh, it's so true. I was just going to say, I like your tell people about it tip, because that had never actually occurred to me to tell people about it afterwards. But it's, you know, I think you're right. It's pretty obvious. But yeah, I really like what you've said there, because it is amazing what happens when you just start. And when you say getting visible, it is getting visible, but it starts with just letting people know what you care about and talking about the stuff you care about, and letting people see that. And then, as you say, any little speaking thing can lead on to another one and another one. Don't wait until you can land a TED Talk or something like that. Just get started. Yeah. And every single one is a chance to connect with people and get more comfortable sharing whatever it is you've got to share.
Yeah.
And you're going to
I think it all comes down to... Sorry, go on.
No, go on.
I think it all comes down to how can I help people? We come back to the same thing. How can I help people? How can I give value? How can I serve people? So, for example, the talk, that's going to be helpful to other people to hear. And you know what? This is a really good point, actually. It's not about giving a talk to just promote yourself. It's about what can you say in your talk that would be really helpful to people.
Totally.
So when I give a talk, and I remember when I gave this talk in Las Vegas, I was the least known speaker at the event. Probably the one that people were least interested in attending because they didn't know who I was. And yet I was the only speaker that gave pre-work. I gave some resources for people to listen to beforehand. This event was over a week. I spent the 2 or 3 days before my talk connecting with people and getting to know them, finding out what's going on. I really wanted to have a connection with people. And then when I spoke, I didn't hold anything back. It wasn't like, okay, I'm going to give you half of it, and then if you want the other half, you've got to pay me. It was, what can I do to give the most value, to have the most transformation, the most impact with people whilst I'm here? And I try and do that with every time I talk. It's like, hold nothing back, give as much away as I can. And this is true with any idea. So what are creative ways to get clients? Well, ask yourself, how can I be more helpful to people? How can I be more valuable? You run the coaching exchange. That's really, really, really helpful to people. You're giving a ton of value away from that, and it will result in some people hiring you. I run a group for coaches. It's value. It's value first. I run a group for men. I'm always focused on how can I make this group more valuable for the people that are in it.
I just want to say, in my particular case, I've never had an intention of gaining clients from the coaching exchange. That's kind of a separate thing. But I love what you're doing with your men's group, and I'd love if you could talk about it in a little bit more detail, because I know that it just wouldn't have occurred to me a couple of years ago, the idea of doing something like that. So, if you could talk a little bit about, why you wanted to do it, and what the members get out of being in it, and so on.
Yeah.
And how it all works.
So, what I found about 18 months ago was a lot of my clients were coming from the men's self-development world, if you like. And that's the world where I came from. So in some ways, it's no surprise that people coming to me who were similar to me and could relate to me and had some kind of shared experience. And what I found was that I was getting a lot of clients from other groups, other people's communities where I was also a part of. And for a while, that was great. It was like, well, I don't need to build my own community. I'll utilize other people's communities. But what I found was I'd kind of got to a stage where when it wasn't my own community, I couldn't do everything I wanted. I couldn't be as creative as I wanted. I couldn't give as much value as I wanted. And I think it's just a little bit of respect. I didn't want to inundate someone else's community with my stuff. And I really wanted everything that I do. I always put, when I do an event, I create a group, a community, anything. I always think about what would I want to be part of. And what I realized was there was no community that I really wanted to be part of. For me, it was on Facebook. There was no group of men there was stuff that was close and there were things that I liked, but there was nothing that I really wanted to be part of. So I created this, what I call the Powerful Men's Group, and it's really evolved over time. But it was like, what kind of group would I want to be part of? And so that's what I created. And I kept the standards very high. I'm like, if you want to be in the group, I want you to be active. I want you to participate. And I had certain criteria, and it was really small. I kept it small at first and grew it organically. It wasn't just about having a huge community for the sake of having a huge community. It was really growing it. And as it's evolved, again, it's just been what's valuable to the group. What do they want? So I'll give you an example. I recently put a poll out and said, if there's one area of your life you could change within the next 12 months, what area would you most want to change? And what surprised me was the biggest thing that came back was people said career. And I gave them a few options, which was a surprise to me. But then in my head, it was like, okay, what can I do to really help people achieve what they want to achieve? And so what I did was, through my network, I had a connection with a coach who was previously a vice president of talent and recruitment or something, at a multinational organization, and now was a career coach. So I connected with her and said, would you do a webinar for my group around, and getting more detailed around career. It was like doing work that they love to do, and people really wanted to learn more about that. And so I did a webinar on it, which again was very, very valuable for that community, for that group. And it was something that I learned from. I learned so much from that. And so it's evolving, but it's all about what does my community want? And then how can I add the greatest value to them? How can I help them the most in that? And what I found is, as I've done that more and more, I've had more and more engagement, more and more involvement with people, and the more value I give, and I saw this for myself when before I was a coach and I used to hire other coaches, or if I went on training courses, the people that gave the most to me were the kind of people that I ended up spending more time with, and eventually often went to their training courses and hired them. But again, like you say, it's not about doing that as a strategy. It's really coming from a place of giving.
There's a lot in what you said that I really liked. I mean, the value thing, of course, and actually thinking, what would I like to be a part of? What would actually give me enough that I would pay attention to it? And there's something in that about kind of familiarity. People tend to go to the training courses of people that they've gotten familiar with, that they've got kind of a rich representation of in their heads, because they've had enough value or enough contact with them that they start to feel like they know that person. And there's something in that about consistency as well. Not trying the occasional shot at something and then, thinking it doesn't work if you don't get much pickup, but actually being in the same environment with people. And the other thing that's so implied in everything you said is, and it might come as a kind of surprise to some coaches, is the length of the game you're playing. And I think you can only do that. Another point it's just brought to mind is, you can only do that if you actually want to be doing what it is you're doing. If you'd set up that group as a very kind of clinical strategy for getting clients, it's a long time to wait and see if it's going to work or not. But if that's an area where you genuinely are interested and excited and you want to give value, then it's very natural to just keep doing that over the length of time it takes to kind of like sow all those seeds and see them grow.
I
mean, it is quite a long game, and I think when you've started, it might seem like the successes and the rewards are pretty thin on the ground, but if you imagine having done that for a year, 2 years or whatever, and you've got several different of those kind of things going on, and you've built, meaningful relationships with people over time, it's then easy to see how much more you can have going on in, say, 2 years than in the first 3 to 6 months or whatever.
I'm all in. When I decided to be a coach in 2012, I was in. There was no doubt in my mind, I'm a coach, this is what I'm going to do, this is what I'm going to spend the rest of my life doing. And therefore it's really easy for me to play, as you call it, a longer game, because I'm not in it for the short term. I'm not in it like, I want to get in, make a quick buck and then do something else. I'm not in it for the lifestyle or anything else, although there are benefits around that. This is something that I'm really passionate about doing. This is something that I love to do. I love helping people. I love seeing them transform, and I love doing good work. This is my art in a way. So it makes sense for me to do that. And what I also realize is there are things that I do. Certain things take priority over different times. So when I started that group, it was kind of just as a fun little thing that I did. It was a group that I wanted to be part of. There's never anything that I do that I'm like, okay, I'm going to do this now, and this is going to get me clients straight away. It's, especially when it comes to creating, it's just having fun. So, and I really want to answer the question as well, because I know there's so many things I could say, and there's so many questions to get through. But I wanted to give another example.
Sure.
One way, how do you get clients? So one way could be sending. So I used to work in corporate. If I wanted to get some corporate clients, one way that I might do that is send a book that's really relevant, that I've been impacted by, to some of my ex-colleagues, to my ex-bosses, along with a little handwritten note. Again, this comes from a place of value. This comes from a place of what would I like to receive when I was in a corporate role? What could be helpful to me? And it's not done as a strategy like, right, I'm going to send out 10 books, and of the 10 books, I'm going to get 2 people having a conversation, or 3 people having a conversation. From 3 people, I'll get one person coming back and hiring me. It's about going out and experimenting and seeing what works for you, because we live in a world of 7 billion people, and I've got certain networks and certain resources and certain relationships, but everyone listening to this is going to have their own. So for them, for something that might work for me, might not really work for someone else. But what I'd really encourage people to do is go and test it out, go and try it out, go and see what's valuable, go and have fun with it. Play a longer game.
Yeah.
And you'll start to see what works for you.
And it sounds contradictory, but also don't be afraid. If you try something, you don't have to stick to it if you decide or discover that that's not for you. It's not the end. You don't have to know in advance exactly what groups of people you want to work with, and you'll be a terrible person if you change your mind down the line and, decide you want to pursue a different strand or whatever, because the only way you can find out is by doing it.